My name is Deborah. I'm 28 years old. And the night my father swung a metal tripod into my skull while I was 8 months pregnant, that was the night I stopped begging my family to love me and started making sure they paid for every single thing they ever did to me. But to understand what happened that night, you need to understand what they spent a lifetime doing before it. I grew up invisible. Not in the way people say when they want sympathy, I mean genuinely, functionally invisible. My mother Meredith would rub my brother Preston's shoulders because he was stressed from failing algebra while I scrubbed the kitchen floor without a single word of acknowledgement. My father Pierce made it clear before I was old enough to fully understand what it meant. Preston was the family legacy.
I was just the extra mouth.
The girl who would eventually marry someone, disappear, and stop taking up space. But I didn't disappear. I had something burning quietly inside me that, looking back now, terrified them more than they ever let on. While Preston spent his 20s crashing cars my parents bought on credit card debt, I was up until 3 in the morning under a single desk lamp, refusing to drown in the mediocrity they had planned for me. When I turned 18, Pierce and Meredith made one thing crystal clear. They would not contribute a single dime toward my education. College, they told me, was a luxury for girls. Whatever money the family had was being saved for Preston's future. So I did what I always did. I took control of my own life. I worked brutal night shifts at a tech support firm, answering calls from angry customers until 4 in the morning, then dragged my exhausted body straight to morning classes at the University of Texas. I didn't sleep for 4 years. I survived on black coffee, instant ramen, and something deeper than willpower, a refusal to become what they expected me to be. I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA. I earned a full academic scholarship. Every other expense came directly out of my own pocket. And the moment my parents realized I was making steady money, the financial bleeding began. Meredith would call crying about overdue utility bills. Pierce would scream over the phone calling me ungrateful and selfish if I hesitated for even a moment. $1,500 every single month, like clockwork, handed over while Preston sat on the living room couch at 30 years old, smoking cigarettes and playing video games on a console my parents bought by maxing out their credit cards. I was walking 2 miles to campus in freezing rain because I couldn't afford a bus pass, while my money was funding my brother's laziness. But I kept pushing, because I genuinely believed that one day they would wake up. After graduation, everything changed. I was hired as a senior software architect at a major tech firm in downtown Austin. My salary climbed into 6 figures. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was breathing. And to mark that moment permanently, I bought my dream car. A custom metallic blue BMW sedan. $85,000, paid in full, in cash. The day I drove off that lot, I cried. Because that car wasn't just metal and wheels. It was every night shift, every skipped meal, every moment I chose myself over their expectations. It was my freedom made tangible. It was also the thing that almost got me killed. Around this time, I met Ethan. He was everything my family wasn't: supportive, protective, deeply loving. We married 2 years ago in a small, elegant ceremony that my parents barely smiled through. Ethan saw through them immediately. He watched how Meredith would inspect my clothes and jewelry with barely concealed envy. He noticed how Pierce only engaged with me when he needed a loan he never intended to repay. Ethan begged me repeatedly to walk away from them. "Deborah, they don't love you," he would say, holding my hand. "They love your bank account." But I held on. Stubbornly, desperately, foolishly, I held on. I thought that now that I was successful, now that I had a good man beside me, they would finally choose to respect me. I walked back into that lion's den over and over again, completely blind to the fact that they were simply waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came when Preston announced his engagement. Her name was Chloe, wealthy family, West Austin, the kind of circles where appearances mean everything. Preston, still drowning in debt and working dead-end jobs, was desperate to look like a success story in front of her parents. So 1 week before the formal engagement party, he called me. His voice was uncharacteristically sweet, which should have been my first warning. "Hey, big sis. Can I borrow your BMW for 3 days? I just need to make a good impression." I hesitated. Preston had a track record of destroying everything he touched. But then Meredith called, weeping, calling me petty and selfish for even pausing. So I handed over the keys. 3 days, I told him. I want it back at the engagement party. I had no idea. I had just handed them the weapon they planned to use against me. The party was held at a lavish event hall in downtown Austin. I was 8 months pregnant, my feet were swollen, my body was exhausted, and I was there alone because Ethan was stuck in an emergency board meeting across town. But I waddled into that glittering ballroom genuinely trying to celebrate my brother. As the night wore on, the heat and noise made me dizzy. I needed to go home. I found Preston near the grand ice sculpture surrounded by Chloe, her parents, and their high society circle. I kept a polite smile on my face. Hey, congratulations. I'm feeling really tired. Can I get my keys back? Preston's smile vanished. He looked at me, then at Chloe's parents, and something dark and deliberate crossed his face. What are you talking about, Deborah? Your car? He chuckled loudly, making sure everyone heard. Mom and Dad gave that BMW to me for my graduation years ago. I didn't borrow anything. In fact, I just gave those keys to Chloe. It's my engagement gift to my fiancé. Chloe held up my custom key fob with a smirk on her face. My blood turned to ice. Before I could even process what was happening, Pierce and Meredith appeared from the crowd and grabbed my arms, dragging me into a darker corner of the hall. Pierce's grip was bruising. His eyes were bloodshot. Shut your mouth, he hissed. You are not going to ruin your brother's night with your jealousy. You're rich. Just buy another one. I screamed that I was calling the police. And that was when Preston leaned in and whispered something into Pierce's ear. I watched my father's face transform into something I can only describe as monstrous. He didn't see his pregnant daughter standing in front of him. He didn't see a human being at all. He grabbed the heavy metal camera tripod standing right beside us and swung it with full force directly at my head. I didn't even have time to raise my arms. The metal struck the side of my skull with a sickening thud that shattered my glasses and split my forehead wide open. I stumbled backward, and my pregnant belly slammed hard into the sharp oak corner of a banquet table. White-hot agony ripped through my entire abdomen. I hit the polished floor, and my hands flew to my stomach. The physical trauma had thrown my body into violent premature labor. Through the blur of blood and tears and contractions tearing through me, I looked up from that floor begging for someone to help. What I saw destroyed the last illusion I had carried my entire life. My mother didn't rush to my side. She pulled Chloe away and whispered, "Don't let the blood get on your dress." Pierce handed the tripod back to the stunned videographer and told the room I had tripped. Preston quietly slipped my BMW keys into his suit pocket with a cold smile. They were going to let me bleed out on that floor to protect a lie. The pain was unbearable, but the realization was worse. And somewhere in the middle of that agony, something in me went completely still and cold. I looked up at my brother holding my keys, and I made a silent promise to my unborn daughter. We're going to survive this, and I will make sure every single one of them pays. My cousin Rachel found me on that floor. She bypassed my family entirely, pulled out her phone and called Ethan. 2 words, "Come now." What happened next, I will never forget for as long as I live. The heavy glass doors of that event hall burst open. Ethan didn't walk in. He stormed in, and behind him came 4 uniformed Austin police officers and a team of paramedics with a gurney. The moment Ethan's eyes found me lying in a pool of my own blood, the sound that came out of him was something I had never heard before. Raw and guttural and absolutely devastating. He dropped his knees, pressed his jacket to my forehead, and held my face in his hands while the paramedics cut away my clothes and attached monitors to my belly, searching for our baby's heartbeat. Pierce stepped forward immediately, his voice perfectly controlled, painting the picture of a concerned father witnessing a clumsy accident. Ethan stood up slowly. At 6'2", he completely towered over my father. And when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more terrifying than any shout. "This entire venue is wired for security," he said, pointing directly at the black dome camera mounted above us. "I own the firm that manages the data infrastructure for this hospitality group. I am pulling that footage right now." Every drop of color left Pierce's face. Preston, who had been quietly edging toward the side exit, found two police officers stepping directly into his path. Before Ethan climbed into the ambulance beside me, he turned and faced my mother, my father, and my brother one final time. "You didn't just break the law tonight," he said. "You tried to murder my wife and my child for a piece of metal. I will spend every single dime I own. I will hire every ruthless attorney in the state of Texas. And I will make sure you rot in a prison cell until your skin turns gray. Your lives are officially over." The ambulance doors slammed shut, and through the back window, I watched handcuffs snap around Pierce's wrists, then Meredith's, then Preston's, all three of them dragged out of that glittering venue in front of Chloe's horrified parents. Her father declared the engagement null and void right there on the pavement. Preston's entire carefully constructed fantasy collapsed in real time as they loaded him into the back of a police cruiser. But I wasn't watching any of that. I was fighting for my daughter's life. My blood pressure was crashing. The monitors showed our baby's heart rate skipping dangerously from the trauma of the impact. The doctors moved fast. Within 20 minutes of arriving, I was under general anesthesia for an emergency C-section. When I opened my eyes hours later in the recovery wing, the first thing I saw was Ethan, eyes bloodshot, face wrecked with exhaustion, smiling through tears. He leaned close and whispered that our daughter was alive. She weighed just under 5 pounds. She was in the NICU, hooked up to monitors. But she was breathing on her own. She was a fighter, just like her mother. The moment I knew she was stable, something shifted inside me. The grief was gone. The desperate childhood longing for my family's approval was gone. What replaced it was cold, focused, and absolute. I told the Travis County District Attorney, who met with us right there in my hospital room for words, "Give them nothing. Everything." We came at them from every direction simultaneously. Grand theft auto against Preston for the BMW, an $85,000 vehicle, which qualified as a second-degree felony in Texas, carrying up to 20 years in prison on its own. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against Pierce, amplified by the deliberate targeting of a visibly pregnant woman. Reckless endangerment and accomplice charges against Meredith for her role in the cover-up. And then I turned to the financial arteries I had been quietly keeping alive for years. The house they lived in, the lease was in my corporate name. I had been paying it for years without a word. I pulled my funding immediately and broke the lease. While they sat in county jail unable to make bail, an eviction notice hit their front door. Their furniture, Preston's gaming equipment, their clothes, all legally placed on the curb. I cut the family cell phone plans. I closed the credit cards they had secretly opened using my information. I froze every financial lifeline I had ever extended to them. They had treated me like an ATM my entire life. I unplugged the machine, and I left them with nothing. 6 months later, the day arrived. I didn't go to the courthouse. I refused to breathe the same air as them or let their presence anywhere near my child. The judge allowed me to attend via secure video link. So I sat in my sunlit living room, my healthy baby girl sleeping peacefully against my chest, Ethan's hand in mine, and I watched the courtroom camera pan across to the defense table. I almost didn't recognize them. The arrogant, well-dressed family that had stepped over my bleeding body was gone. Pierce, Meredith, and Preston sat pale and gaunt in matching orange jumpsuits, chained at their wrists and ankles. Because I had cut off their access to money, they couldn't afford private attorneys. They had an overworked public defender who looked completely checked out. When it was my turn to speak, I looked directly into the camera lens and I laid out 28 years, the financial exploitation, the psychological abuse, and every detail of what happened on that floor. Then the prosecution played the security footage. Crystal clear. Pierce swinging the tripod into my head. Meredith shielding Chloe's dress from my blood. The entire courtroom went silent. The judge showed no leniency. Pierce, 15 years in state prison. Preston, 7 years for grand theft and conspiracy. Meredith, 3 years of hard probation, a permanent felony record, homeless, broke, and blacklisted from ever securing a loan or stable employment again. I didn't wait to watch them be led away. I simply closed the laptop, The silence that filled my home was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. I looked out the window at my metallic blue BMW parked in the driveway. Then I looked down at my daughter, sleeping in my arms. Karma didn't find my family on its own. I built it, filed it, and delivered it directly to their door. I spent 28 years believing that if I worked hard enough, loved enough, and sacrificed enough, they would choose to see me. What I know now is that blood alone doesn't make a family. Love does. Loyalty does. Respect does. And some people will never give you those things, no matter how much of yourself you pour into them.
I am safe now.
I am free. And the moment I closed that laptop was the moment my real life finally began.